Thanks so much. Really, thanks for joining. I love it. A personal note, July 2nd, so not that far from now, I will be getting my right knee replaced. Kind of hope while I'm under they'll replace it with a brain. I doubt it. Now, I was taught to ignore pain and played a lot of sports, so I've had some orthopedic fun already, right? I've had 3 knee surgeries, never a replacement there, a shoulder rebuild, a hip replacement. I have compression fractures in my spine, and I'm not complaining. I have seen awful suffering and heartache in so many good people over the years, and this is not that. And I'm grateful to have good health care and just countless blessings. I will announce that this weekend at the Masses with this encouragement that the 3 things I really don't want to hear right now, people's horror stories, people saying, it's nothing, I know better, or any suggestions, did you try this injection or treatment, whatever. I know that I'm in good hands and I'm not really too worried. I approached this, I think, a little bit like Woody Allen approaches death. He said, I'm not afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Yeah, I'm kind of that way too. I mean, I imagine I'll be just fine. So I won't be in person the weekend of the 6th or 7th. I don't know if we'll pre-record something or not. I don't have time to think about that yet. But should be back in the following weekend in person anyway. So that's just that update, July 2nd for that. So please whisper prayer. That's really all that I need at this point. Thanks. And in this homily, we might sometimes feel like the disciples who were getting tossed around in this boat. Well, those storms visit us all. And I want to suggest a way of looking at that or thinking about that I hope is of some help. Anyway, God's blessings. Thanks again for joining. Have you ever experienced something like what the disciples felt today? I mean, did you ever wonder if the storm that was hitting you or the waves that were swirling around you or in you were going to be too much for your little boat? Some of the disciples were seasoned fishermen here, right? And they'd navigated the roughest of storms that the Sea of Galilee would throw their way. But this storm is so fierce, they're afraid they're going to die. And as they're being thrown about, they do this. They find Jesus, who is sleeping in the boat. They awaken the sleeping Jesus and ask him to save them. They awaken the sleeping Jesus. There's something in their decision to do that I think is important for us today. We all face storms. Sometimes there's just a regular squall that tosses us around a bit. It's not fun, but we know we'll eventually be okay. Then there are those storms that threaten to swamp our boat. And like those disciples, we don't know if we're even going to make it. Perhaps today's gospel invites us to do what those terrified disciples did, to awaken the sleeping Christ within us. Christ is in us. And I know that Christ is never asleep. The reality is that we are not awake to his presence. He's always there, present to us. But I thought that maybe using that metaphor, it's kind of a different way of thinking about it, can help us awaken to the fact that he is already right there, fully present to us. So I'll use that image, to awaken the sleeping Christ within us. Because I think that whenever we just try to do anything like that, what happens is we awaken to the Christ that is already there. Whatever the crisis, the joy, the letting go, we awaken the sleeping Christ within us. Now, a word about what that looks like for each of us. First, if you've not yet experienced this, the storms will come for you and those you love. They will. I mean, there are, for example, family squalls of various intensity. You know, those battles of wills over getting ready for bed, how late to stay out, or family personality differences, your faith differences, your political differences, whatever. We all get tossed about a bit by these storms. Sometimes in our lives there are huge storms, the ones that threaten to swamp our boat, to sink it, the ones that make us wonder if we'll ever be okay. The thousands of storms that you and others have described for me over the years. You know, the parents whose daughters' fight with anorexia was so severe that there was a good chance she might have died, right? Or the parents whose child is killed by a drunk driver and they wonder how they'll go on or if they even want to. I could give you countless stories, right? Crushing defeats and heartaches, losses and tragedies that make us feel like we losing our grip on the lifeboat to which we're so desperately clinging. The internal squalls that make us wonder if we're ever going to find our balance again. Now, if you haven't been in one of those, you've at least heard of those, right? The big storms. They come for us all. That is one of the times to awaken the sleeping Christ in us. And when we do so, what happens? When we awaken the sleeping Christ in us, what do we find? We find Christ there. All of Christ. And the fact that we find all of Christ is crucial for us. And these three elements of the fullness of Christ are what we awaken. One, we awaken the strength of Jesus in us. Jesus, who today woke up, faced right into that storm. We awaken the strength in us to look right into the storms and to do what we can to protect our loved ones, to keep our integrity, to try to keep ourselves together. We can't fix it all, or necessarily stop the storms usually, but our strength matters. And the strength of Christ in us, we awaken. Secondly, at the same time we are awakening the gentleness, the tremendous kindness of Christ. The Christ who was truly tender with the broken and the sorrowful, the suffering. The Christ who was so tender with us. Sometimes the awakened Christ just holds us and weeps with us. We awaken that Christ. And thirdly, the risen Christ that awakens in us is us, the body of Christ. We awaken that Christ that shows how we are truly in this together. We don't just grab our own life jackets to save ourselves, But we remember that we're in this together, and we work to row in the same direction, offering our gifts and receiving from one another. We awaken that Christ. As an aside, I dare say that one of the best and clearest gifts by far of our new retreat program is how greatly it awakens that in us. That realization that we don't go it alone, that we are in it together. Yes, when we awaken the sleeping Christ in us, we awaken all of him. Let's do that, right? Let's awaken the sleeping Christ in us who had great courage, and the Christ who was sometimes lonely and frightened. The Christ who could take a stand for what was right, and the vulnerable Christ who needed the support of others, to pray with him, to walk with him. The Christ who had great inner strength, and the tender Christ who could weep. That's the Christ in me and in you. And when you, as for me, awaken the sleeping Christ in you, that's what you awaken. And it's what you need in the moment. It is. For each of us, whatever our life's calling, sometimes the storms will hit us. And when they do, that is one of the crucial times to awaken the sleeping Christ within us. And the more we do so, the more we find how easily we connect to that place inside of ourselves where we are both ourselves and more than ourselves, where we are one with the Christ alive within us. As I said, when we do so, when we awaken the sleeping Christ, we find all of him. We find what we need.